The sky had a sound before it had light. It began as a pressure in the air, a tightening that pushed down on the desert like an unseen palm. Sand lifted in thin veils from the dunes, skittering across cracked asphalt. A ruined freeway stretched its ribs toward the horizon, rebar clawing upward, motionless and listening. Then the sound deepened. Not thunder exactly, too steady, too deliberate, but a roar that folded over itself, vibrating through layers of atmosphere that hadn't known anything heavier than radioactive wind in 2 centuries. The noise pressed into the land, into the buried bones of cars and the hollow shells of houses, into the empty vaults beneath the sand. High above, fire tore open the clouds. The machine fell wrapped in heat. Plasma licked along his armored frame, burning orange and white, shearing away fragments of scorched alloy. His systems registered altitude loss, atmospheric friction, gravitational variance. His internal processors screamed warnings in clipped bursts of Cybertronian code, each one swallowed by the roar outside. Sound was everything. The shriek of re-entry scraped against his sensors, 1,000 frequencies colliding at once. The air itself screamed as he tore through it, molecules breaking apart under the violence of his descent. Beneath that chaos, he detected something else. Radio noise. Old, fragmented, a static-riddled chorus bleeding upward from the planet's surface. Human signals. Weak, degraded, but alive. He adjusted instinctively, armor shifting with the sound of grinding plates, trying to angle the failing craft away from what little life he could hear. The movement sent a fresh vibration through his frame, a deep internal clang that echoed through his chest cavity. Structural integrity dipped. Stabilizers failed. The roar grew teeth. Below him, the Wasteland answered. A brotherhood of steel patrol had halted on a ridge miles away, their power armor silhouettes sharp against the glowing clouds. Paladin Brandis tilted his helmet upward as the noise rolled over them, low and enormous, setting his teeth on edge. "What in God's name is that?" a knight muttered over open comms. Their Geiger counters clicked faster, confused by the sudden atmospheric disturbance. Dust spiraled upward around their boots, dragged by invisible currents. The sound didn't fade like a passing vertibird. It grew, it layered, it felt closer with every breath. Further south, a Mr. Handy unit hovered above a derelict homestead, its thrusters whining in alarm as its sensors overloaded. "Oh my," it warbled, voice crackling with interference. "That is most irregular." The machine falling from the sky heard all of it. The radio chatter, the Geiger clicks, the faint whine of ancient fusion cores. Each sound mapped itself across his awareness, painting a broken world beneath the firestorm. His optics struggled against the glare, light refracting through particulate clouds thick with ash and irradiated debris. He saw the land in fragments. A dry riverbed split open like a scar. A cluster of skeletal buildings collapsed inward, roofs caved, windows empty. The twisted spine of a pre-war highway curling through the desert like a fossil. No cities, no Energon grid, no Cybertronian signatures. This was not any battlefield he knew. The roar fractured as the remains of his vessel tore away completely. What was left of the craft spun off in flaming arcs, slamming into the wasteland ahead of him. Each impact sent up a separate concussion, thumps and booms rippling outward, rattling loose windows that had survived the bombs only to finally give way now. The commander locked his limbs, bracing. Impact was no longer a calculation. It was a certainty. The ground rushed up, not visually but audibly. He could hear it. The dense, dead sound of compacted earth, the hollow echo of buried structures, the faint metallic ringing of long-forgotten debris waiting just beneath the sand. The roar collapsed into a single, overwhelming note. He struck. The impact did not explode outward at first. It punched inward. Sound vanished for half a heartbeat, compressed into nothing, before erupting back into existence all at once. The desert buckled. A shockwave rolled across the wasteland, flattening dead brush, tossing loose scrap into the air. Sand leapt skyward in a boiling wall. Rusted car doors tore free from their frames. The freeway groaned, concrete cracking with a drawn-out scream as fractures raced along its surface. The Autobot drove deep, earth swallowing him in layers, sand, stone, buried steel, each one announcing itself with a different sound. Grinding grit, snapping rock, a hollow clang as he tore through the remains of something mechanical, long dead. Heat bled away from his armor in rapid pulses. Cooling systems strained, hissing softly beneath the larger noises. His internal world narrowed to vibration and pressure, to the groan of his own frame resisting forces meant to tear it apart. Above, the dust cloud rose like a mushroom, blotting out the stars. For miles, the wasteland rang. Loose debris pattered back down in uneven rhythms. A stop sign clanged against asphalt, spinning on its bolt. Somewhere, glass finally gave up and shattered, the sound delicate and distant beneath the settling roar. Silence tried to return. It failed. The crater smoked, a vast wound in the earth. At its center, half buried and motionless, lay the massive shape of the fallen machine. Armor scorched black and gold, heat shimmering around him in waves. The sound of settling sand whispered over his plating. Radio static crackled faintly through the air. Radio static was the first thing that reached him. Not the clean, disciplined transmission bands of his own kind, but something frayed. Voices gnawed down to ghosts, signals limping along wounded frequencies. It bled into the crater in uneven breaths, rose and fell like a sick heartbeat. The sound slid across his awareness, threading itself through cooling systems and fractured sensor arrays. He did not move at first. Sand lay heavy over his chest plating, packed tight by the force of impact. Heat still shimmered above him, distorting the air into ripples that bent what little light filtered through the dust cloud. Internal diagnostics ticked by in sharp pulses, each one accompanied by a tone that rang faintly inside his frame. Structural damage, extensive. Primary propulsion, offline. External environment, unknown. The radio noise persisted, static layered with static, punctured now and then by brief flickers of order, numbers spoken too fast, a burst of laughter cut short, a mechanical voice repeating a polite greeting until the signal collapsed under its own age. The sound anchored him. His fingers twitched beneath the sand. The movement sent a low scrape through the crater, grains sliding off his knuckles and pattering down his forearm. He paused, listening to the result. The desert answered with silence so wide it felt intentional, broken only by the whisper of settling debris. He pushed. Armor plates shifted with a deep, resonant grind. Sand sloughed away in sheets, hissing as it poured off his torso. The texture registered immediately, too dry, too fine, carrying trace radiation that ticked against his sensors like distant rain. His systems adjusted, dampening exposure, rerouting energy where they could. As he rose, the static grew louder. It wasn't coming from a single direction. It was everywhere. The air itself seemed saturated with it, as though the planet had learned to speak only in fragments after burning its own voice away. He rolled one shoulder free of the crater wall. The movement sent a tremor through the ground, small but deliberate. Somewhere beyond the dust, something metal clanged in response. He noted it, catalogued the distance by the delay in sound. Above the crater's rim, silhouettes had begun to form. A pair of Brotherhood of Steel knights crouched behind the remains of a highway barrier, power armor servos whining softly as they adjusted their stance. Paladin Brandis raised one gauntleted hand, signaling stillness. His helmet optics flickered, struggling to reconcile readings that made no sense. "That thing's moving," someone whispered over comms. Brandis didn't answer. He was listening, to the static crackling through his headset, to the low thunder of something massive pulling itself from the earth. His Geiger counter clicked steady but climbing, confused by an energy signature it had no category for. In the crater, the machine drew one knee up beneath him. The sound of it, metal sliding against compacted stone, rolled outward in a slow wave. It vibrated through buried ruins, set loose pebbles skittering down the crater walls. He felt the feedback through his joints, the resistance of gravity different from what he remembered, heavier in subtle ways. He lifted his head. Dust smeared his optics, dulling the world to a copper haze. Through it, light filtered down in muted bands, catching on jagged edges of wreckage embedded in the crater walls. A pre-war car door twisted nearly in half, a length of rebar bent into a crude spiral, fragments of concrete still bearing the ghost of painted lane lines. Sound filled in what sight could not. Wind slid along the crater's rim, carrying with it the faint chime of loose metal tapping against metal. Far off, something mechanical hummed, an ancient generator, perhaps, its rhythm uneven. Beneath it all, the static continued, patient and persistent. He brought one hand up, brushing sand from his chest plate. The grains rasped against alloy, leaving behind fine scratches that caught the light. Radiation warnings flickered and faded as his systems compensated. He scanned. The act was instinctive, almost ceremonial. Sensors fanned outward, mapping terrain in layers of sound and vibration. He felt the hollow spaces beneath the surface, collapsed tunnels, empty vaults sealed tight, the vast aching quiet of long-abandoned infrastructure. No Energon signatures, no Cybertronian life, only human echoes, scattered and dim. A Mr. Handy drifted into view at the crater's edge, its thrusters whining nervously as it hovered behind a slab of broken concrete. One of its 3 arms clutched a rusted laser pistol it had no real intention of using. "Oh dear," it said aloud, voice wobbling through a speaker that hadn't been serviced in decades. "This is oh my, this is highly irregular." The words carried on the air, thin and tinny. The Autobot turned his head slightly toward the sound. His optics sharpened, focusing past the dust, locking onto the floating machine. The Mr. Handy froze, gyroscope whining louder as it fought the urge to flee. Behind it, half hidden by debris, a pair of settlers watched with wide eyes. One clutched a pipe rifle so tightly his knuckles had gone white beneath the grime. The other pressed a hand over her mouth, breathing shallowly as if the sound of it might draw his attention. He registered them all. The armored soldiers, the floating domestic unit, the fragile humans with their improvised weapons and faster heartbeats. Their sounds painted them clearly. Servo whine, thruster hum, the quick, uneven rhythm of fear. He shifted his weight and stood. The crater protested, stone cracked under the redistribution of mass, a sharp, splitting sound that echoed outward. Sand cascaded down the walls in soft avalanches, hissing as it went. The movement kicked up a fresh wave of dust, momentarily swallowing his upper frame. When it cleared, he loomed fully above the crater floor. He paused there, towering and still, allowing his systems to finish recalibrating. The static thickened, filling the silence between heartbeats. Somewhere, a distant radio tried and failed to hold a melody together. He lifted his head and turned slowly, scanning the wasteland as it stretched away from him in all directions. Broken highways, skeletal buildings, the long scar of a dried riverbed cutting through the land. The sound of the world flowed into him, and he listened. The campfire snapped and popped like something alive and irritated. It sat at the center of the scavenger camp. Flames licking at a rusted shopping cart turned sideways for a windbreak. The firelight crawled over scrap metal walls and bus husks sunk into the sand, over license plates nailed together like scales. Every sound carried too far in the open desert, so the people spoke low, even when they argued. A Geiger counter clicked beside the fire, steady and impatient. Someone had propped it on a crate of pre-war canned goods, its needle jittering with small, constant movements, not enough to panic, enough to remind. A, in a faded NCR jacket, crouched close to the heat, turning something unidentifiable on a skewer. The smell was oily, sharp. She kept glancing up at the sky as if expecting it to tear again. "You hear it," she said. "Still hear it." Across from her, a man with a shaved head and a scar that split his eyebrows spat into the sand. "Everyone hears it, don't mean it's coming back." The sound hung there, not the fire, not the clicking, but the memory of that roar. Even now, minutes later, it pressed against the inside of the skull, too big, too loud, like the sky had tried to clear its throat. At the edge of the camp, a raider leaned against the door of an old school bus, fingers drumming on a length of pipe. The metal rang softly with each tap. He stopped, listening, then started again slower. "That wasn't no vertibird," he said. "I've shot at vertibirds, they don't sound like that." A super mutant sat on an overturned fridge a little distance away, his bulk casting a misshapen shadow that wobbled in the firelight. He frowned, brow ridge pulling down as he tried to put words to the feeling. "Sky was angry," he said finally. "Very angry." No one laughed. The NCR reached over and turned the Geiger counter slightly, angling the speaker away from the group. The clicks softened but didn't stop. Her jaw tightened. Then the ground gave a low, distant groan. Not a quake, not an explosion, a sound like something massive settling into place far away. The fire jumped, sparks lifting and vanishing into the dark. Several hands went to weapons on instinct, pipe rifles, a battered laser pistol, a knife with a chipped edge. A young man climbed onto the roof of a derelict sedan at the camp's perimeter, peering toward the horizon. The metal creaked under his boots. "I see dust," he said. "Big dust." Someone swore under their breath. The scarred man stood, stretching his neck as if that might help him hear better. The sound was different now, lower, slower. A rhythm to it, like metal moving against stone. The campfire crackled louder as someone threw another broken pallet onto it. The flames flared, light washing over faces tight with calculation. "So what?" the raider said. "We go look. Whatever fell out of the sky, it's gotta be worth something. Ain't nothing falls that hard and lives unless it's useful." The NCR shot him a look. "Or it's a bomb that didn't finish its job yet." The super mutant slid off the fridge, landing with a heavy thud that sent a vibration through the sand. He cocked his head, listening. "It's walking," he said slowly. That earned him a round of looks. "Walking how?" someone asked. He shrugged, massive shoulders scraping against the bus behind him. "Like big thing walks, slow, loud." The clicking of the Geiger counter seemed to speed up, though no one touched it. At the far edge of the camp, half hidden behind a stack of tires, a Mr. Handy hovered, its thrusters whispering as it adjusted altitude. Its eye swivels spun, trying to reconcile sensor data with a world that refused to behave. "Oh my," it murmured. "That is most alarming." The sound grew clearer now, carried on the wind. An immense, deliberate scrape followed by a pause. Then another. Each one sent a faint tremor through the soles of their boots, subtle enough that they might have imagined it if not for the way the fire responded. Flames leaning as if to listen too. The young man on the car roof swallowed. "That ain't no Deathclaw." "No," the NCR said, eyes still on the horizon. "It's not." She could hear it between the Geiger clicks, the weight of it. Whatever it wasn't rushing. It wasn't hiding. It moved like it expected the ground to make room. The raider's grip tightened on his pipe. "So what? We just sit here?" A long moment passed. The fire cracked. The counter clicked. Far off, metal rang against stone again, closer this time, the sound rolling across the wasteland like a warning drum. The NCR exhaled through her nose. "We watch," she said, "and we don't get stupid." No one argued. All of them stood there in the firelight, faces turned toward the dark, listening as the sound of something enormous moving through the desert crept steadily nearer. Gunfire shattered the night. It came from the dark beyond the camp's perimeter, sharp and uneven, muzzle flashes blinking like bad stars between the dunes. The first shot punched through a sheet metal wall and sent a spray of rust flakes across the fire. Someone screamed. The Geiger counter clattered to the ground, its clicking swallowed by the noise. "Raiders!" the scarred man shouted, already moving. The camp exploded into motion. The NCR kicked sand over the fire with her boot, smothering the flames into a smoking hiss. Pipe rifles came up. A laser pistol whined as it charged. The Mr. Handy spun in place, thrusters shrieking. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, this is most unsafe." Another burst of gunfire tore through the bus hull, sparks jumping as rounds struck old steel. A raider's laugh cut through the chaos, high and feral, amplified by a crude loudspeaker somewhere out in the dark. "Leave the scrap, and maybe we leave you breathing." The super mutant bellowed and charged toward the sound. Heavy footsteps thudding, but a rocket streaked in from the dunes and detonated against a pile of tires. The blast threw him sideways, rolling him through the sand in a cloud of dust and smoke. The night filled with overlapping sounds, shouting, weapons discharging, the whine of energy cells overheating. The smell of burned powder and hot metal crawled into every breath. Then something else cut through it all. A deeper sound. Slower. Fast. Metal met stone with a deliberate, grinding weight that did not belong to any human machine. The ground trembled, not from an explosion, but from mass being placed upon it. The raiders hesitated. One of them lowered his rifle half an inch, head tilting. "What the?" The sound came again. Closer now, a single step. The vibration rolled through the sand and into bone, into teeth. Even the gunfire faltered, shots losing rhythm as men looked toward the dark. Out of the dust, a shape moved. It was too tall, too broad. Its outline cut against the dim glow of the camp like a piece of the ruined freeway had stood up and decided to walk. As it advanced, the sound of its movement unfolded in layers. The low resonance of mass shifting, the scrape of armored plating flexing, the faint hiss of cooling systems venting heat into the night air. The machine stepped into the edge of the camp's light. Firelight caught on scorched alloy and broad planes of armor, throwing reflections that crawled and broke across his frame. Sand slid from his shoulders in soft streams, whispering as it fell. His optics burned steady and bright, cutting through smoke and dust, fixing on the figures with raised weapons. For half a second, no one fired. The wasteland seemed to draw in a breath. Then a raider panicked and squeezed his trigger. The rounds sparked harmlessly off the machine's chest, a sharp, ringing sound that echoed back at the shooter. The Autobot did not flinch. He took one step forward, planting his foot with a sound like a collapsed wall. The impact sent a pulse through the ground that knocked several raiders off balance. "Enough," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. It rode the air the way the earlier roar had, vibrating through metal and bone alike. The word landed heavy, final. Some of the raiders fired again. Laser bolts flashed red and green, splashing light across his armor. A missile streaked toward him, its exhaust screaming. He moved. The motion was precise, almost restrained. One arm came up, plating, shifting with a muted clang, and the missile struck his forearm instead of his chest. It detonated in a blossom of fire that vanished almost immediately, swallowed by his mass. Smoke rolled off him in thick sheets. He stepped forward through it. The raiders broke. He did not chase them all. He moved through the camp's edge like a force of correction, disarming one man with a single twist that sent a rifle spinning away, backhanding another into the sand, hard enough to leave him gasping but alive. Each movement carried sound. The dull thud of bodies hitting ground, the sharp snap of weapons breaking, the metallic groan of structures giving way under sudden pressure. A raider lunged with a knife, screaming. The machine caught him mid-charge, fingers closing around his torso. The raider's breath left him in a wet rush as he was lifted clear off the ground. For a moment, they were face to face, the man's eyes wide, reflecting firelight and fear. The machine released him. The raider hit the sand and did not get back up. The last few attackers fled into the dunes, their footsteps retreating fast, uneven, swallowed by distance. One dropped his weapon as he ran. It clattered against a rock and lay there, humming faintly as its energy cell bled out. The gunfire stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. It pressed down on the camp harder than the noise ever had. Smoke drifted low, carrying the fading smell of burned powder. The Geiger counter clicked once, loudly, then settled back into its steady rhythm. The Autobot stood at the center of it all, arms lowering slowly to his sides. His cooling vents hissed softly, a sound like breath leaving lungs after exertion. Sand continued to slide from his armor in quiet streams. Around him, people stared. The NCR's rifle hung forgotten at her side, barrel smoking. The super mutant pushed himself upright, blinking, a low, confused grunt in his throat. The Mr. Handy hovered in place, eye swivels locked, thrusters whining in a thin, nervous pitch. No one spoke. Only the wind moved, stirring ash and smoke, and beneath it all, the faint, persistent click of radiation counting down a world that had just changed. The wind worried the sign until it screamed. A rusted red rocket logo hung above the ruined gas station, its paint long ago flayed down to dull metal. Each gust shoved it sideways on its bent supports, and it answered with a drawn-out shriek that rose and fell, like something protesting its own existence. The sound carried across the open lot, threading itself through the aftermath of the fight. The camp had moved here cautiously, dragging the wounded, hauling what supplies hadn't been burned or trampled. The gas station sat half-sunk into the sand, its canopy collapsed on one side, its pumps gutted and hollow. Someone had pried open the garage door just enough to crawl inside. Others clustered beneath the overhang, weapons close, eyes never still. The machine stood apart from them, just beyond the edge of the cracked concrete. He had chosen the spot deliberately. The wind hit him first there, rattling loose plates of tin nailed to the walls, tugging at dangling wires that chimed softly against one another. The sign's shriek scraped across his sensors in long, uneven waves. He catalogued the rhythm, the stress fractures in the metal, by the way the sound warbled at its peak. Behind him, the desert lay open and listening. Inside the station, the NCR pressed a blood-stained rag against a man's shoulder. The man hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. Every few seconds, her eyes flicked toward the open doorway, toward the massive silhouette framed by blowing dust. "He just stopped them," someone murmured. "Didn't even look mad." A Brotherhood of Steel knight stood near the pumps, helmet off now, sweat cutting clean lines through the grime on his face. He kept his laser rifle angled down, but his gripwad never loosened. The knight's gaze traced the machine's outline again and again, as if repetition might make it make sense. "That wasn't any tech, I know," he said quietly. "Not Enclave, not Institute, not anything." The Mr. Handy drifted near the ceiling inside the garage, its thrusters making a thin, anxious whine that harmonized badly with the wind outside. "Oh my," it said, voice dipping and rising with static interference. "I do hope we have not attracted something apocalyptic." The Autobot listened. The sounds layered themselves naturally, the sign's metallic protest, the wind slipping through broken windows, the faint click of a Geiger counter somewhere behind him. He heard the humans' voices too, low and careful, the way they bent their words around fear. Their heartbeats were quicker now, adrenaline thinning out into something shakier. He did not turn to face them yet. A shape detached itself from the shelter of the pumps and stepped into the open. The scarred man from the camp moved slowly, hands held wide away from his body. His boots scuffed against the concrete, sending small scraping sounds outward that felt loud in the wake of violence. He stopped well short of the machine, swallowing hard. "Hey," he said. His voice cracked on the word. He cleared his throat and tried again. "You, big guy?" The wind yanked at the sign above them, wrenching another scream from its bolts. The man flinched but held his ground. The machine turned then. The motion brought a low, controlled grind of armor plates shifting, a sound that set the man's shoulders tight. The Autobot's optics adjusted, dimming slightly against the reflected glare of sand and metal. He looked down at the human, listening past the words to the tremor beneath them. "You defended this group," the machine said. His voice was steady but quieter now, pitched so it didn't crush the fragile air between them. Even so, it vibrated faintly through the concrete underfoot. The man nodded too fast. Yeah, you did. Saved our asses, if I'm being honest." Behind him, the NCR stepped out from under the canopy. She moved with more care, rifle slung but visible, posture rigid. The wind tugged at her jacket, snapping a torn patch against her arm. "We don't know what you are," she said, "but we know what you aren't." The machine angled his head slightly, a gesture that caught and redirected the wind, so it howled briefly along the edge of his shoulder plating. "And what is that?" he asked. She met his gaze, jaw set. "You're not a raider, not the way they are." The sign shrieked again, metal on metal, punctuating her words. The Brotherhood knight shifted his weight, boots grinding on grit. "There's a Brotherhood patrol not far from here," he added. "They heard you come down. They're going to come looking." The machine processed this, cross-referencing distance and sound delay from earlier vibrations he had logged. His sensors had already marked the faint hum of power armor servos moving cautiously along a ridge. "Others will come as well," the NCR said. "People who won't ask questions first." The scarred man swallowed, then nodded toward the Wasteland. "You walking around out there alone, you're gonna draw every gun for miles." A gust of wind tore through the station lot, scattering loose paper and ash. The sign's cry bent high, then dipped low, the bolts holding. For now. The Autobot remained still, letting the wind speak. He listened to the way it slid over ruined vehicles, the way it whistled through bullet holes in sheet metal. He felt the weight of eyes on him, the tight, waiting silence, stretched thin. "What do you want?" he asked. The question was simple. The sound of it settled heavily, like something placed carefully rather than thrown. The NCR hesitated. He heard the pause in the hitch of her breath, the faint rasp of fabric as her fingers tightened on her rifle strap. "Information," she said finally. "Routes. Who controls what, where the ground's bad and where it's worse?" The scarred man nodded quickly, latching onto the opening. "Places to avoid, people to avoid. Vaults that ain't empty, settlements that might listen if you don't come in stompin'." "The mister." Handy drifted a little closer to the doorway, optics swiveling. "I possess several outdated but potentially useful maps," it added, hopeful and nervous all at once. The wind pulled hard at the red rocket sign. One of the bolts gave a sharp, metallic squeal, but held. For a moment the sound dominated everything, a long, grating cry that seemed to demand an answer. "And in return?" the machine asked. The NCR didn't look away this time. "You stand with us," she said, "at least for a while." The scarred man shifted his feet, grit crunching. "You don't gotta fight every fight, just be there. Folks see you. They think twice." The Autobot listened to the wind, to the sign, to the way the humans' voices strained against hope they didn't quite trust. He registered the distant hum of approaching armor, the far-off crack of something collapsing under its own age. Protection. Presence. Wait. The wind screamed again above them, metal protesting metal, and the sound rolled across the cracked concrete as the survivors waited for his response. The wasteland stretched ahead, barren and unbroken, except for the scars of pre-war highways and skeletal buildings clawing at the sand. Every step forward sent grit skittering under the Autobot's feet, though feet were heavy plates of alloy that sank only slightly into the desiccated desert. He moved with deliberate slowness, each motion generating a resonant vibration through the compacted earth, a muted percussion that carried farther than his optics could see. The NCR walked a few paces behind, pipe rifle cradled but ready, boots crunching the gravelly surface. Each scuff echoed faintly, punctuated by the rhythmic whisper of loose sand blown by the wind. The scarred man followed beside her, shifting his weight nervously, eyes darting to distant dunes. Somewhere beyond, the skeletal spire of a collapsed overpass groaned under the push of the wind. A super-mutant lumbered behind them, each step heavy, a low thrum reverberating through the ground. He grunted occasionally, not in conversation, but as if noting the texture of the terrain, the unevenness of cracked asphalt and jagged stones. The Autobot's sensors mapped all of it, the subtle changes in vibration through the sand, the faint whine of distant power cells hidden in derelict vehicles, even the soft metallic clatter of debris he passed. He absorbed it in layers, translating sound into distance, angle, and threat potential. "They're not following us," the NCR whispered, keeping her gaze to the horizon. "But I don't like how quiet it's gotten." He noted the tension in her voice, the micro pause between breaths. Fear, he recognized, but disciplined. He adjusted posture slightly, the hiss of his armor vents cutting through the still air. Up ahead, a derelict gas pump leaned precariously, its nozzle swinging with a soft metallic squeal. Each time it struck the bent frame of its pedestal, it produced a subtle but distinct note that echoed faintly across the lot. He catalogued it. The wind changed rhythm slightly. The pump twirled faster, striking harder. He shifted slightly to balance, footing sending a muted grinding echo through gravel and stone. The scarred man pointed toward a ruined service station half a mile ahead. "We should be able to cross there without getting a sightline from the ridge." He squinted. "Maybe grab some water, if the tanks ain't dead." The Autobot scanned. Structural instability in the station was immediate. Roof beams hung like dead arms. Sand had piled against the outer walls, softening the approach but concealing hidden hazards. He adjusted their path slightly, tilting his body in a subtle arc that shifted weight across his sensors to compensate for uneven footing. The human companions followed, trusting instinct as he led. The desert was quiet in patches, the absence of noise almost physical. A distant wind dragged across the dunes, lifting grit that struck their exposed surfaces with a dry hiss. Each step sent up a small cascade of sand, a granular whisper marking their passage. Even the super mutant steps, heavy as they were, fell into rhythm with the desert's own voice. A rattling clatter came from somewhere behind, a twisted metal sign, bent and forgotten, dancing across cracked asphalt. The sound shot through the Autobot's awareness first as texture, the scrape of rust against concrete, the loose vibration in the ground. He froze mid-stride, head tilting slightly, sensors sweeping in silent pulses to locate the source. The humans froze with him, breaths shallow. The wind was stronger now, carrying it in fits across the terrain. Another clatter answered it, this one closer, sharper. Someone, small, probably human, had displaced it unknowingly. Or perhaps not. The Autobot moved on again, slow, deliberate. Each motion resonated with a tactile precision, plates and servos articulating to absorb the uneven desert ground. Sand slid under his boots in miniature avalanches. Small stones pinged against his legs. His optics tracked the humans, reading micro-tremors in their stances, slight hesitations, the way they tested footing. He compensated instinctively, shifting his own mass to prevent unnecessary jolts from transmitting to them. The service station loomed. Broken pumps lined the front, cracked windows revealing shattered shelves inside. Dust swirled in lazy eddies, catching in the firelight of the fading sun and sending flecks of reflected light across armor surfaces. A faint metallic hum emanated from a rusted generator, long dead, vibrating irregularly through the concrete. The Autobot's head tilted slightly. He registered the layout, the weight distribution of sand and debris, the sound profile of potential threats, hollow metal backing, unstable beams, the low groan of foundations pressed under centuries of neglect. He signaled, a subtle shift in posture, and the humans followed his lead, moving carefully, boots and claws crunching softly on gravel, careful not to kick up dust too quickly. The desert air carried each sound farther than they realized, each step ringing out in delicate harmony with the low, omnipresent hum of the wasteland itself. A faint, distant clank echoed from the far side of the station, metal striking metal in a pattern too deliberate to be random. The scarred man froze, eyes narrowing. "Trap," he muttered. The Autobot registered the pulse. It was not a trap, just a scrap panel moved by the wind. But the humans did not know that. The machine slowed further, scanning, tilting head, listening. The subtle vibration of the ground under their feet, the irregular pulse of air through fractured structures, the creak of an ancient pump, they all painted a picture. He read it like music. He moved forward again, and the group followed. Sand whispered underfoot. Gravel rang softly. The sound of movement stretched across the station lot. Every step was measured, every vibration registered, every creak, every groan, every hiss of displaced air was accounted for. And still the wasteland waited, listening. The collapsed vault yawned ahead, half swallowed by sand, its steel doors twisted like paper in a storm. The Autobot paused at the edge of the gaping entrance. He could feel it before he saw it. The subtle vibrations of hidden tunnels beneath, the hollow hum of reinforced chambers long abandoned, and the faint static that seeped upward from broken terminals deep within. Wind funneled through the broken structure, carrying the sharp tang of irradiated metal, old oil, and dust that had not moved for decades. Each gust pushed against his frame, rattling armor plates with a soft, insistent clang, as though the building itself were breathing. The NCR stepped forward, boots crunching against gravel and sand. She held a hand up, signaling the others to stay back. "This one's a trap," she said, voice low, almost swallowed by the hiss of wind. "Vaults like this, you never know what's still alive down there." He did not respond with words. His head tilted, sensors sweeping, registering layers of sound. The gentle drip of condensation somewhere deep, the faint scraping of shifting debris, the ghost of pre-war machinery humming faintly through rusted conduits. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the sharp tang of decayed electronics. He stepped onto the threshold. Each footfall sent up a soft spray of sand and grit, the granular texture hissing as it slid along his plating. The hollow concrete groaned beneath his weight. The humans followed hesitantly. The scarred man's boots clicked sharply on fractured flooring. The super mutant's thuds vibrated through the structure like distant drums. Even the Mr. Handy's thrusters whined quietly as it adjusted to avoid scraping rusted pipes. The Autobot's optics adjusted to the dim light, scanning every surface, every shadow, every angle. The walls were etched with old graffiti, flaking paint curling away in dusty curls. Broken monitors leaned against one another, screens dark, fractured, faint traces of wiring dangling. He knelt and brushed a thin layer of dust from a terminal. The texture was rough, pitted with corrosion. Beneath it, he detected faint energy signatures, irregular but familiar. Circuits built to emulate some logic system not unlike his own. A ripple of recognition passed through his sensors. Architecture familiar, alien, incomplete. "What is it?" the NCR asked, voice barely audible. Her eyes scanned the vault's interior nervously. He extended a finger, lightly tracing the edge of a cracked console. "Pre-war computational nodes," he said. His voice was low, resonant, each word vibrating softly against the concrete floor. "They attempted a logic system, similar in structure to my own." The humans exchanged glances. The scarred man swallowed. "So it's not gonna blow up in our faces?" The Autobot's head tilted slightly. The static of the old terminals pulsed faintly against his sensors. "Unknown. Caution advised." He rose and stepped further into the vault. Sand cascaded from his armor, falling in whispering sheets. The wind outside had dropped, leaving the cavernous interior almost eerily still, every sound amplified. The tap of a loose pipe under his foot, the scrape of metal siding, the faint hiss of dust disturbed from decades of rest. The super mutant sniffed the air. "Metal smells like war," he muttered. His voice resonated against the hollow walls. The Autobot noted it without comment, moving toward a collapsed elevator shaft. Beneath it, the structure of the vault sank into deeper darkness, vibrating faintly under his weight. He detected pockets of unstable flooring, hidden hollows, and traces of lingering radiation. Each detail mapped precisely through the textures and sounds alone. A sudden metallic squeal echoed from the far end of the chamber, a panel settling under its own age. The humans jumped. The Autobot's sensors flared in response. Measuring, calibrating, nothing moved beyond the settling debris. He stepped carefully towards it, footfalls soft but deliberate. Each contact with sand and broken concrete sent subtle vibrations across the floor, the granular hiss of displaced particles marking his path. Something shifted in the back of the vault, a faint hum, like a long-dead generator coming to life. Static crackled over old wiring, uneven, unpredictable but familiar. He stopped, listening, head tilting slightly, allowing the vibrations to paint the shape and origin of the sound. The NCR whispered behind him, "It's alive, isn't it?" He did not answer, only advanced, body poised, every sensor reading, every vibration, every metallic echo guiding him deeper into the heart of the long-abandoned structure. Sand and dust fell like rain from his plated shoulders, and the interior of the vault seemed to exhale in response, a faint groan of old metal welcoming or warning the intruder. Step by step, they moved deeper, each sound layering upon the last. The hiss of wind through broken ducts, the soft rattle of loose pipes, the faint electronic pulse from fractured nodes. The Autobot catalogued it all, translating the Wasteland's memory into knowledge he could act upon. Every micro-movement precise, every vibration telling a story. He paused at the threshold of a darker corridor, where the static pulsed stronger, a rhythm almost deliberate, like a heartbeat buried beneath centuries of dust. And then he stepped forward. The overpass loomed above them, half collapsed, a skeletal bridge of concrete and twisted rebar. Below, the wind funneled through gaps, carrying the dry hiss of sand scraping over rusted metal and the occasional sharp clatter of loose debris. Shadows pooled under jagged sections of the highway, hiding shapes that shifted with intent. The Autobot paused at the base, optics sweeping. The sound of distant boots, human but cautious, echoed faintly off the broken pillars. A rough pattern of low laughter and muffled commands drifted down from above. Raiders, organized, wary, armed. The NCR motioned for the group to halt. "This is it," she whispered, voice brittle but steady. "They control the overpass, and they'll kill anyone who steps out of line." The scarred man swallowed hard, shifting his weight on the cracked concrete. "We're sticking to the edge?" The Autobot's head tilted, sensors mapping vibrations through the ground. He felt the weight of unseen bodies, the subtle tremor of armored boots moving above. He noted where the structure was weakest, where loose concrete would scream if stepped on. Each step here was a signal, and every misstep could announce them. A raider emerged into the dim line of sight from a makeshift perch, a steel girder jutting from the broken roadway. The wind tugged at his cloak, flapping it against his side, the soft swish punctuated by the faint clink of chained ammunition at his belt. His rifle swept left and right. One of the NCR scouts muttered under his breath, "He sees us!" The Autobot moved forward, the soft grind of his armored joints against one another, a counterpoint to the distant clatter above. He kept his motion deliberate, controlled, measured, like an echo that wouldn't alarm the structure itself. Sand shifted under his boots in soft cascades, barely audible over the wind. "State your business," the raider shouted, voice metallic over a makeshift PA system cobbled from old speakers. His arms flexed, aiming a rifle, but he didn't fire. The order was to test, not to kill. Yet. The Autobot stopped several meters from the base of the overpass. His optics glimmered faintly in the low light, reflecting dust and metal fragments. "We are passing," he said. His voice was firm, deep, resonating against the concrete pillars. Every vibration calculated, measured. Not loud, not threatening, but unmistakable. The raider hesitated, reading the mass before him, then spat to the side. passing. Nobody passes without paying." The scarred man muttered, "Great, we're screwed." The Autobot tilted his head slightly. Subtle. Not a gesture of aggression. He extended one hand, brushing the sand at his side, sending a faint hiss into the wind. Then he stepped forward again, each footfall producing a muted boom that echoed across the hollow supports. It was precise, controlled force, a warning and a statement. The raider shifted, uncertain. More boots clattered from above. The overpass structure vibrated faintly as heavier figures moved. The Autobot felt the tremor, registering weight, distance, intent. They weren't bluffing. He stopped again, shoulders squared, gaze sweeping the perimeter. "Step aside," he said. Not a command, an observation of fact. The vibration of his voice traveled down the concrete, reaching ears even where vision couldn't. There was a pause, a hesitation heavy with expectation. Then the raider barked, "You, move closer and I swear!" A sudden gust tore across the overpass, rattling metal and sending a loose panel clanging against a beam. It sounded like a drumbeat of warning. The humans flinched, sand hissing around their boots. The raider's shout caught in the wind, swallowed, broken. The Autobot moved again, stepping forward, each motion deliberate, armor shifting in soft, grinding increments. The overpass trembled faintly under him, dust cascading from fractured joints. The raiders froze. A volley of shots rose from the upper beams, not aimed to kill but to test. Bolts pinged harmlessly against his chest, scattering sparks. Each impact sent a ripple of sound along his frame. A vibration he catalogued instantly, noting trajectory, mass, and intent. The Autobot tilted his head, listening to the pattern. He calculated, adjusted. His next step produced a controlled, low thud that unsettled the footing of the nearest raider. Another step, and he leaned into the wind, shifting his mass. The upper shooters staggered, surprised by the weight and precision of his movements. He did not raise weapons. He did not fire. Yet the rhythm of his motion, the sheer presence, sent the message. He would not be stopped. The raider atop the girder cursed, stepping back toward the shadows. Below, others hesitated. The wind tugged again at loose debris, sending a clatter across the concrete that sounded like reinforcement to the Autobot's silent threat. The humans followed him carefully, stepping in his rhythm. Sand hissed beneath boots. Gravel skittered in tiny avalanches. Dust swirled, catching what little light remained. Every movement was deliberate, measured, a symphony of small sounds marking their passage. The Autobot moved forward through the shadowed base of the overpass, closer to the weak points of the structure, every vibration and metallic echo painting the battlefield. The raiders above whispered, unsure, calculating, and slowly some began to retreat into the darker spans of the collapsed highway. Night had settled fully over the wasteland, a heavy darkness that pressed against the edges of the collapsed overpass. The wind whispered through broken concrete and twisted rebar, carrying the faint metallic screech of loose panels clanging against one another. Every sound was magnified in the emptiness, making each footfall, each shifting piece of debris, a signal to the world. The Autobot stood at the edge of the camp they had established beneath the shelter of the overpass. Sand trickled through his armor joints in thin, whispering streams. Dust rose from each small movement, catching what little light the moon managed to scatter across the ruins. He scanned the horizon, optics adjusting to the dim gray of rubble and dunes, parsing each vibration through the soles of his feet, the tension in the cracked concrete, the hum of distant power cells buried under debris. The NCR crouched beside him, rifle resting across her knees, eyes tracing the shifting shadows. She exhaled slowly, the rhythm uneven, alert. "They're gone," she said softly, voice carried in small pulses over the whispering wind. "For now." The scarred man rubbed at a bruise forming along his shoulder, his movements producing sharp scrapes as his boots shifted in the sand. "Yeah, but they'll be back," he muttered. "Somebody that big? They don't let folks just walk." The supermutant sat on a half-collapsed guardrail, hunched, breathing in slow, measured bursts. Each exhale rattled loose gravel beneath him, a soft percussion that matched the settling debris around them. The Autobot stepped forward slowly, the armor on his legs grinding faintly, a controlled resonance that carried through sand and concrete alike. He did not raise his weapons. He did not make a sound other than the soft hiss of displaced sand. The humans followed, instinctively mirroring his careful movements. The distant campfire had long since gone cold, leaving only the faintest glow of smoldering embers and ash that drifted in the wind. The smell of burnt powder lingered, mingling with the sharp metallic tang of scorched metal and dust. Each inhalation brought it to the human senses in layers, reminding them of the violence that had passed and the one that had almost reached them. The Autobot paused, sensors sweeping outward. He noted the faint, uneven rhythm of human breathing, the subtle tremor in hands that gripped rifles, the way the wind moved against the hollowed walls of the overpass. Every vibration mapped a story of fear, of caution, of survival instinct. One of the raiders, a lone figure, had lingered too long in the shadows. He stumbled over loose debris, the metallic scrape cutting through the night. The scarred man stiffened, eyes narrowing. "Son of a—" he began, reaching for a weapon. The Autobot's head tilted slightly. A step forward sent a low, controlled vibration across the ground, enough to make the would-be raider pause and reconsider. His weapon hand froze mid-motion. He looked up, eyes widening at the immense form standing silently in the darkness, armor catching the faint moonlight, casting a shadow that swallowed the desert floor. The raider bolted, sand kicking up behind him in a whispering cloud, disappearing into the dunes. Others, further back, had already fled, their hurried footsteps uneven, muted by distance. The Autobot remained still, tall and unyielding, surveying the perimeter. Sand sifted from his armor in delicate cascades. Dust settled into the cracks in the concrete beneath him. The humans, feeling the weight of his presence more than hearing it, let themselves exhale, listening only to the rhythm of the night and the faint, persistent clicks of the Geiger counter in the distance. Silence claimed the wasteland for a moment, broken only by the whispering wind, the settling debris, and the faint metallic hum of a world still listening for the next move. Dawn broke slowly over the desert, pale and hesitant, like the light itself feared to disturb the scarred landscape. Rays spilled over the jagged edges of collapsed buildings, glinting off twisted metal and sand-blasted concrete. Dust rose in lazy spirals from footprints left by the humans and the Autobot the night before, each particle catching the dim glow and spinning in place before settling again. The Autobot stood atop a small dune, surveying the wasteland. His optics adjusted automatically, sweeping across shattered highways, skeletal overpasses, and rusted vehicles half swallowed by sand. Every vibration through the ground reached his sensors. Footfalls of animals long vanished, the hum of distant buried machinery, the subtle resonance of pre-war infrastructure groaning under centuries of neglect. The NCR crouched at the dune's base, rifle ready, eyes scanning for movement. Her breathing was shallow, the quiet hiss of her exhalations almost drowned by the faint scrape of sand shifting under the Autobot's weight as he shifted slightly. "Looks quiet," she whispered, though her tone lacked conviction. Too quiet. The scarred man adjusted the straps on his pack, a soft creak echoing from the worn leather. "Quiet's when trouble shows its face," he muttered. A faint vibration pulsed through the sand, almost imperceptible. The Autobot froze, plating creaking softly as he braced for any sudden shift, his head tilted, sensors sweeping outward, tracing the origin, a distant thrum beneath the cracked highway, subtle but deliberate. "Movement," he said, voice low and even. The humans stiffened. The supermutant leaned forward slightly, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air. "Something's down there," he said. His words were accompanied by the deep thrum of his own pulse reverberating faintly through the desert floor. From the shadows beneath the highway, a caravan of raiders emerged, cautious, moving in staggered formation. Dust swirled around their boots, hissing softly as grit scraped against cracked concrete. Their weapons were raised, though unevenly, each step measured, wary of what they had heard last night. The Autobot descended the dune slowly. Each footfall pressed into the sand, sending granular cascades downward with a whispering hiss. Armor plates shifted with muted groans, a mechanical symphony of precision and weight. His shadow stretched long across the desert, swallowed partially by the rising sun, creating a moving wall of silence that carried authority. The NCR motioned for the group to spread slightly, taking cover behind fractured walls and vehicles. Each human movement produced faint echoes, metal scraping against metal, boots scuffing gravel, the soft hiss of loose sand. The supermutant crouched low, muscles coiled, ready to spring. The raiders froze at the edge of the open lot, scanning upward. One stepped forward, voice cracking slightly over the wind. "You! What are you?" The Autobot stopped, a full 10 meters from them, and looked down, his optics locked onto the speaker, registering micro-movements, tension in the fingers on the weapon, micro-sweats on the forehead, the subtle tremor in boots pressed to sand. He noted everything, weighing intent, threat, and opportunity. "You are trespassing," he said finally. The sound carried in low, steady vibrations, rolling across the concrete and sand, pressing outward. It was not a threat, not aggression, but undeniable authority. The lead raider flinched, stepping back slightly, adjusting his footing on loose gravel. The others whispered nervously to one another, unsure. A metal chain clinked, caught by the wind. The Autobot's sensors picked it up instantly, small but telling. A shot rang out. Not from the Autobot. A raider at the back fired a crude pistol into the sand near the Autobot's foot. The sound cracked sharply, ricocheting off broken walls. Sand hissed as it flew up around the armor. The Autobot did not move in retaliation. Instead, he shifted his weight. Plates ground softly, sending a controlled vibration through the sand that rolled toward the raiders. It was a warning. The air seemed to pulse in tandem. A low, mechanical heartbeat, amplified by mass. The humans watched. Breath caught. The NCR's finger hovered near her trigger, knuckles whitening. The scarred man muttered, "They're gonna bolt." The lead raider took a step back, then another, hesitation pressing down like the desert sun. A second shot rattled off, embedding sparks in a nearby metal panel. The sharp ping of impact sending a micro-vibration across the ground. The Autobot's head tilted slightly. He detected every nuance. Weight distribution, micro-shifts in stance, and the subtle rise and fall of collective fear. One more deliberate step from him, and the ground hummed under the raider's boots. pressing against them like a living wall. The sun burned higher now, pale and relentless, casting long, fractured shadows across the broken highway. The Autobot walked steadily through the deserted lot beneath the collapsed overpass, each step deliberate. Sand hissed as it shifted under his armored boots, cascading in thin sheets from the edges of his plating. Every vibration traveled outward, a subtle warning to any who might linger unseen. The NCR moved behind him, scanning, rifle held at the ready. Sweat streaked her grime-covered face, and her breaths came short and sharp. Each exhale carried the dry, metallic tang of the wasteland into her lungs. "He's leading us straight to the vault," she whispered to the scarred man beside her. His hand rested on the grip of a makeshift pistol, fingers flexing in nervous rhythm. The Autobot paused at the mouth of a narrow canyon, its walls fractured and jagged. Debris littered the path, twisted rebar, rusted signage, cracked pavement. A faint, rhythmic thrum resonated beneath the surface. Buried cables, collapsed tunnels, or perhaps pre-war machinery still humming in exhaustion. The machine tilted his head, sensors sweeping, mapping every subtle vibration, every micro-movement in the sand. From the shadows above, a group of raiders emerged cautiously, moving along a ledge. Their boots scraped gravel and concrete, sending sharp echoes down to the canyon floor. The leader's eyes were wide beneath a tattered hood. "That thing, it's not human," he muttered, half to himself, half to the others. "Not one of ours." A single gunshot cracked from behind them, but it missed, embedding in a wall. Sand and concrete dust hissed upward as fragments rained down. The Autobot's optics tracked the shooter in milliseconds, the motion translating instantly into calculated angles and weight distribution. He stepped forward deliberately, each footfall producing a muted resonance through the canyon floor. Armor plates ground softly, releasing tiny, controlled vibrations. The raiders hesitated, then scrambled along the ledge, unsure of where to go. One slipped, a faint metallic clang echoing against the canyon walls. The humans followed cautiously. The scarred man's boots crunched against debris, sending up clouds of dust that hissed as they fell. The NCR's grip tightened on her rifle, knuckles whitening. The super mutant padded behind them, each step a deep thrum through the sand, adding to the ambient symphony of sound and vibration. Suddenly, a panel of concrete above shifted with a scraping groan. Dust fell in fine clouds, carried by a gust of wind. The Autobot froze, sensors flaring to detect any hidden threat. He adjusted his stance subtly, tilting his head, letting the vibrations through the canyon floor inform his next movement. The raiders above hissed and retreated, disappearing back into shadow. One dropped a weapon, the clatter echoing faintly. The Autobot did not react to the discarded item. He simply continued forward, calm, deliberate, a wall of presence moving through the canyon. As they approached a rusted gate at the canyon's end, the static in the air thickened. The Autobot paused, registering the subtle hum of long-buried electronics beneath the metal. The humans froze beside him, breaths catching in the heavy air. The scarred man whispered, "Vault door, this is it." The Autobot extended one hand and brushed the sand at his side, sending a soft hiss upward. He placed a plate against the gate. The metal groaned faintly under his weight, the sound resonating through the canyon like a bell tolling in slow motion. The vault door yawned open, though it had long lost the grace of its original machinery. Rusted gears groaned in protest, metal scraping against metal, and sand cascaded from the edges in fine, whispering clouds. The Autobot paused at the threshold. sensors sweeping the interior, registering every vibration, every echo, every lingering trace of energy buried beneath decades of neglect. Inside, the air was thick and heavy. Dust hung in faint columns, disturbed by the Autobot's presence, glinting where shafts of weak sunlight penetrated cracks in the ceiling. The smell was a sharp combination of rust, decay, and something else faintly electric, as if old circuits sighed in response to his heat and movement. The humans entered cautiously. The NCR led, rifle raised, eyes tracing shadows like they might conceal the living or the dead. The scarred man shuffled behind, muttering under his breath, toes scuffing against the gritty floor. The super mutant followed last, each thud reverberating through concrete, shaking small stones loose from the walls. A low hum resonated beneath them, the vault's forgotten systems stirring faintly under their intrusion. The Autobot's optics flared, catching the subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm. It was not alive exactly, but it pulsed like memory, like the heartbeat of something buried too long. "Looks abandoned," the scarred man muttered, voice uncertain. "But I don't like it." The Autobot tilted his head, listening. Not the words, but the echoes, the vibrations, the subtleties beneath the surface. Floors shifted subtly under hidden weight. Panels groaned faintly, wires flexed with settling tension. This was not merely a vault. It was a slumbering machine, waiting. He moved deeper. Sand hissed under his plating, cascading in thin streams, settling into cracks in the concrete. Each step produced a controlled resonance, a vibration that told him more about the structural integrity than any sensor could quantify. A faint flicker of light caught on a half-buried terminal. He crouched slightly, brushing dust aside with a gloved hand. The metal was pitted, corroded, yet faint energy pulsed beneath, irregular, almost sentient in its rhythm. The humans leaned forward, drawn despite themselves, curiosity tempered by fear. "Pre-war tech," he said finally, voice low, vibrating against the concrete floor. "Designed for control, for containment." The NCR's eyes narrowed. "Contain what?" He did not answer immediately. He swept his sensors across the vault's interior, collapsed hallways, rusted doors, shattered terminals. Everything hummed faintly, telling a story of entropy and neglect. Then, in a corner partially hidden by debris, a faint flicker of movement, a shadow that did not belong to the humans or the Autobot. The supermutant growled softly, nostrils flaring. "Something's down there," he murmured. The Autobot stepped closer, every motion deliberate. Armor plates ground faintly, sending controlled vibrations into the concrete floor. He knelt, hand hovering over the shadowed corner, sensors flaring in calibrated pulses. The shadow shifted. Dust swirled as a small pre-war robot, long dormant, clattered to life. Its thrusters hissed, weak and uneven, voice crackling through an aged speaker. "Hello? Identification required. Protocol. Activated." The humans froze. The NCR's rifle raised slightly. The scarred man's mouth opened, then closed again. The supermutant tensed, low thrum vibrating through the floor. The Autobot's optics glimmered faintly. He observed, calculating. Presence, mass, intent. No aggression, only recognition. The robot circuits sputtered, trying to reconcile the new energy signature in the vault. Step by step, the Autobot moved closer. Dust hissed from armor joints. Panels groaned under decades of decay. Static crackled faintly in the air. Every vibration told a story, every echo a map. The interior of the vault shivered faintly, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The pre-war robot's thrusters coughed unevenly, sending faint hissing pulses of air across the floor. Its optics flickered weakly, scanning the massive frame of the Autobot, attempting to reconcile the new presence with its decades-old programming. The Autobot remained still, letting the vibrations of the environment, the micro-echoes from cracked panels and shifted debris inform him. Each subtle sound, the soft hiss of dust sliding from ceiling cracks, the groan of stressed concrete beams, the clatter of loose wiring, painted a map of the space and its history. The NCR crouched behind a collapsed terminal, rifle trembling slightly in her hands. "It's alive! But what is it doing?" she whispered. Her words seemed swallowed by the thick, stagnant air, drifting away like sand on a windless day. A faint metallic click echoed from the far end of the hall. The shadowed corners shifted. The Autobot's sensors flared. He detected the pulse first, something heavy, deliberate, moving beneath a collapsed hatch. Dust cascaded in soft streams, tiny avalanches marking subtle shifts in the environment. The super mutant growled, low and cautious. "It's not human," he muttered, voice vibrating through the floor, resonating faintly against the Autobot's own sensors. The scarred man took a step forward, boots crunching gravel and loose debris. "Should we—" he started, but the Autobot's optics swept toward him, a subtle tilt of the head that communicated both caution and command. The man froze, feet planted against the grit-covered concrete. The pre-war robot emitted a series of clicks and hisses, struggling to process. "Protocol, breach, entity unknown." It extended a thin, corroded arm, the faint electrical pulse sending a low hum through the floor. The Autobot responded with a careful step forward, armor grinding faintly as he shifted weight. The vibration traveled through the concrete, the sand, even the scattered metal reaching the smaller machine before it could act further. The pre-war robot stuttered, halted, then settled. Recognition, or perhaps recalibration, passing through its circuits. A faint rumble rose beneath them, subtle at first, then growing in intensity, hidden tunnels shifting, old machinery straining under centuries of neglect. Dust rained from above, and the floor beneath their feet vibrated in sync with the distant low hum. The NCR swallowed hard, sweat dripping down her temple. "What the hell is that?" she whispered, voice quivering. The Autobot's optics glimmered faintly, absorbing the data, processing it into patterns of motion and probability. He stepped closer to the vault's center, positioning himself between the humans and the shifting hum. The pre-war robot sensors tracked him, optics widening as it attempted to reconcile friend from threat. A sudden, sharper rumble shook the vault. Loose metal rattled against concrete. The dust fell in miniature avalanches, hissing as it slid across old wiring and fractured panels. The humans staggered slightly, clinging to the Autobot's massive frame for guidance and reassurance. He extended a hand slowly, palm open, sensors flaring in soft pulses. The pre-war robot tilted its head, circuits sparking faintly as recognition, or at least curiosity, passed through its mechanical mind. The scarred man exhaled, shoulders tensing. "We're in deep now," he muttered almost to himself. The vault seemed to exhale around them, dust and debris dancing in slow spirals through the dim light. The Autobot stood in the center, towering over the humans, armor catching faint rays of fractured sunlight that filtered through cracks in the ceiling. His optics glimmered with a muted glow, scanning every micro-vibration in the cracked concrete floor, every displaced panel, every tremor in the air itself. The pre-war robot hovered uncertainly, thrusters hissing unevenly, casting faint shadows across the walls as it spun slowly in place. The NCR pressed a hand to her brow, sweat and dust streaking her face in streaks of gray and red. Her rifle rested across her knees, barrel angled toward the Autobot, not in hostility, but in instinct. Her eyes tracked every subtle movement, every creak and groan of metal and concrete, like a predator calculating its next strike. She could feel the vibrations through the floor, the minute tremor of the Autobot's weight shifting, and each one sent a prickling tension up her spine, though she dared not admit it. "They're cooperating?" she muttered under her breath to the scarred man beside her. His boots scraped against loose gravel, kicking up tiny clouds of sand that hissed as they fell. The scarred man shook his head slowly, fingers brushing at a chipped pistol. "I don't know, and I don't like it," he muttered, voice hoarse. "Machines like that don't just exist here and care about anything." He took a cautious step forward, the crunch of gravel beneath his boot echoing faintly through the hollow vault. The super mutant, crouched near the back of the room, shifted uneasily. Each of his massive steps sent deep vibrations rolling through the floor, disturbing loose sand and old debris. His nostrils flared as he sniffed the stagnant air, tasting the sharp tang of irradiated metal and ozone, remnants of decades-old circuits awakening. "Something's wrong," he muttered, voice low and guttural, resonating through the vaulted chamber. "Vault feels sick." The Autobot's sensors flared subtly, absorbing every pulse, every micro-shift. He noted the subtle rise in radiation from the pre-war robot circuits, the uneven tremor in the floor beneath their feet, and the faint hum of distant machinery echoing from tunnels deeper within the vault. He did not speak yet, though the humans felt the pressure of his presence, the way his mass seemed to organize the very air around them. A sudden groan of metal echoed from the far side of the vault. Dust cascaded from fractured ceiling panels, falling in thin, whispering streams. The humans instinctively stiffened. The scarred man's hand twitched toward his weapon. The NCR's grip tightened. The super mutant's shoulders tensed, muscles coiling like springs ready to snap. The Autobot tilted his head slightly, letting the vibrations speak to him. The sound was deliberate, slow, not random. Something had shifted deeper within the vault. Something large, something old, still connected to the systems that pulsed faintly through the walls. His sensors traced it. Pressure points along the floor, subtle mechanical echoes, traces of energy lingering in fractured circuits. The pre-war robot hissed, spinning slightly as its sensors attempted to locate the source. "Warning! Anomaly detected! Protocol breach!" Its voice crackled through its ancient speaker, a mixture of static and urgency. Sparks arced faintly from exposed wiring along its arm. The NCR leaned closer to the scarred man, whispering, "It's not a raider. It's not anything we've seen." Her eyes darted toward the Autobot, and whatever it is, it's not friendly yet. The Autobot took a measured step toward the deeper shadows of the vault. His footfall sent up a muted vibration, sand cascading in faint clouds that settled with a whisper. The humans followed carefully, moving in his rhythm, trusting instinctively that he could read the environment better than they ever could. The pre-war robot floated ahead slightly, thrusters hissing unevenly, following the Autobot's calculated path. Deeper inside, the floor sloped downward into a long corridor, its walls lined with corroded conduits and shattered control panels. Every step amplified the low hum of machinery and distant ventilation ducts. Loose cables clinked together in the faint drafts, creating a staccato metallic percussion. Dust spiraled in lazy eddies, catching weak shafts of sunlight and reflecting them across the Autobot's armor. Suddenly, A low rumble rolled beneath them. The vault's foundations groaned faintly, sand and gravel shifting in response. The humans froze mid-step. The scarred man whispered, voice trembling slightly, "It's waking. Something's waking." The Autobot's head tilted, optics adjusting to the subtle vibration patterns. The source was massive, below the concrete floor. Collapsed tunnels, half-buried machinery, energy cores long forgotten, beginning to pulse with faint life. The pulse sent a micro-vibration across the vault, brushing against the human's boots and the Autobot's massive plating alike. The supermutant growled low in his throat, nostrils flaring. "Something moves. Big," he muttered. His voice resonated through the floor, matching the vibrations he felt through the soles of his feet. A sudden metallic crash echoed from deeper within the vault, sending dust spiraling from overhead panels. The humans flinched. The scarred man gritted his teeth, muttering under his breath. The NCR's rifle rose instinctively, barrel twitching toward the dark shadows. The Autobot stepped forward deliberately. Each motion produced controlled, low-frequency vibrations that resonated through the floor, sending a subtle warning to whatever stirred below. The pre-war robot floated alongside, thrusters hissing in uneven bursts, optics wide as it attempted to follow the Autobot's calculations. Shadows shifted along the walls. A metallic groan echoed faintly, punctuated by the hiss of escaping air. Something massive moved beneath the floor, its weight pressing against the weakened concrete. Dust cascaded from fissures in the walls, tiny clouds hissing as particles fell and settled. The NCR whispered, voice tight, "We need to—" The Autobot's optics snapped toward her. He did not speak, but the weight of his presence pressed a silent command. "Patience. Observation first. Reaction second." Another crash reverberated through the vault, closer this time. Loose cables clattered against panels, creating a chaotic metallic percussion that made the humans flinch. The super mutant's eyes narrowed, sensing every micro-vibration, muscles tensing in preparation. The Autobot stepped forward again, slow, precise. His armor groaned faintly, the joints releasing low, controlled sounds. Dust trickled from plates onto the cracked floor. Every step calculated, every vibration monitored. The pre-war robot mirrored him, attempting to match the subtle rhythm. A shadow emerged at the end of the corridor, massive, hulking, partially obscured by debris. Sparks arced faintly from broken machinery embedded in the floor. The humans froze in place, breath caught in their throats. The scarred man whispered, voice cracking, "What the hell is that?" The Autobot's optics glimmered softly. He sensed it, mapped it, measured its weight, its intent, its potential threat. The mass before them was old, ancient, yet still functional. A pre-war experimental war machine, partially buried, partially alive, awakened by their intrusion. It groaned as it shifted, sand and dust cascading off its rusted armor in faint, whispering streams. The pre-war robot emitted a series of clicks and hisses, circuits sparking as it attempted to interpret the anomaly. "Hostile, unidentified engagement protocol," it stammered, voice trailing into static. The humans instinctively pressed closer to the Autobot. The NCR's rifle was raised, hand trembling slightly. The scarred man's grip tightened on his pistol. The super mutant's muscles coiled, ready to launch. The Autobot stepped slightly forward, each footfall sending a controlled vibration through the floor. Dust fell from his plating, tiny avalanches settling with soft hisses. He did not raise weapons. He did not threaten. Yet his presence alone organized the space, creating a buffer between the humans and the awakening war machine. Another low rumble shook the vault. Loose debris rattled. Panels groaned. The massive figure ahead shifted, dust cascading in sheets. Sparks crackled from exposed wiring, mingling with the hissing dust and the faint hum of long-dormant energy cores. The vault groaned in protest as the massive pre-war war machine settled back into the shadows, partially inactive, but still alive, a hulking relic of old ambitions. Dust hung thick in the air, catching the dim shafts of sunlight that filtered through cracked panels in a ghostly haze. Every tiny movement, an armored plate shifting, a hand brushing against rubble, sent clouds of fine grit hissing softly to the floor. The Autobot remained unmoving, a sentinel in the center of the chamber. His optics glimmered faintly, sweeping over the humans, the pre-war robot, and the colossal war machine. Sensors flared intermittently, capturing vibrations from the settling structure, the subtle tremor of energy cores still pulsing, and the faint, irregular heartbeat of the ancient machine beneath layers of dust and debris. The NCR exhaled slowly, her lungs tasting the sharp tang of rusted metal and the acrid scent of spent circuits. Her rifle hung loosely in her hands, but the tension in her shoulders suggested it might be raised again at any sudden movement. It's not moving, I think," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. Her gaze flicked nervously between the massive Autobot and the hulking figure in shadow. The scarred man let out a long, rattling breath. "We've poked the hornet's nest and lived to tell," he muttered, knees brushing against gravel-strewn concrete. His voice wavered, betraying the adrenaline still coursing through him, the residual tension from the near confrontation. He shifted his weight, sending small, granular hisses across the floor. The supermutant crouched low, muscles taut. His deep, guttural breaths vibrated faintly through the concrete floor. "It watches," he muttered, "feels alive." His nostrils flared, tasting the heavy air, sensing every subtle movement and vibration in the vault. The Autobot adjusted his posture slightly, armor grinding faintly, a soft metallic resonance that punctuated the heavy silence. He swept sensors over the environment again. Fissures in the walls, loose panels, shifting debris, the faint thrum of energy beneath the floor, the vibration of the ancient war machine waiting, patient, calculating. Every detail was noted, measured, and catalogued. The pre-war robot hovered a little closer to the Autobot, thrusters hissing softly, struggling to maintain balance in the swirling dust. "Entity. Stabilized?" it asked in halting tones. Sparks flickered along its corroded panels as it attempted to recalibrate. The Autobot's optics focused on the smaller robot. A subtle tilt of his head acknowledged the question without words. Sensors flared to track the faint residual activity of the hulking machine in the shadows. Not yet hostile, but its presence exuded weight, authority, and danger. Outside, the vault entrance shivered under the wind, sand cascading in lazy streams over the cracked concrete. Loose metal panels rattled, sending sharp, staccato echoes through the chamber. The humans flinched with each sound. Every external vibration amplified the tension inside, a constant reminder that the wasteland outside was never quiet for long. The scarred man muttered, voice tight, "We can't stay here. That thing's going to wake up completely eventually." He glanced at the Autobot, a question unspoken in his wide eyes. Could they even survive if it did? The NCR lowered her rifle slightly, but didn't relax her grip. "We need to map this place," she said, voice low, eyes scanning the shadows. "Every tunnel, every conduit. If we can control the paths, we can control the machine, or at least survive it." The Autobot moved forward, each footfall controlled, precise. Armor plates ground softly as his weight shifted, sending micro-vibrations through the floor. Dust cascaded from his plating in thin streams, settling silently on fractured concrete. His sensors traced the subtle energy pulse of the ancient war machine, slow, irregular, but alive, breathing beneath layers of concrete and steel. The pre-war robot followed, hissing softly as thrusters adjusted. Scint, sparks flickered along its arms and torso, reacting to the charged environment. Its optics widened, reflecting both fear and curiosity. A sudden metallic clang echoed from deeper in the vault, a loose panel shifting under the weight of residual wind currents. The sound ricocheted through the chamber, punctuating the thick silence like a bell. The humans flinched, stepping closer to the Autobot. The super mutant growled softly, muscles coiling instinctively. The Autobot paused, sensing the subtle rhythm of movement within the ancient war machine. Even partially dormant, its vibrations carried intent. It wasn't random, not mechanical, it was aware. Sensors traced micro-oscillations along the floors and walls, registering the stress of aged metal shifting in anticipation. The NCR exhaled sharply. "We're lucky it didn't strike," she said, voice tight, almost lost in the hiss of dust falling from above. "Luck doesn't last." The scarred man's hands shook slightly as he brushed dust from his pack. "It's never luck," he muttered. "It's presence. It knows we're here. That thing in the shadows, it knows too." The Autobot tilted his head, acknowledging the analysis without speaking. His sensors picked up what the humans could not: the delicate interplay of vibrations beneath the vault floor, the low-frequency hum of dormant energy cores, the faint stress line spreading across corroded metal. Every micro-movement told a story. Every sound was a map. The super mutant shifted forward slightly, letting his massive hands brush lightly against the cracked floor. "I can feel it moving," he said. His voice resonated through the chamber, like waiting. The Autobot stepped closer to the hulking war machine's shadowed form. Dust spiraled from the floor and panels around him, settling in thin, whispering layers. Sparks flickered faintly from exposed circuitry within the relic's armor. It remained still, yet every micro-vibration indicated awareness. The humans instinctively closed ranks, trusting instinctively that the Autobot's presence was their shield. The NCR's finger hovered near her trigger, the scarred man's knuckles white, the super mutant's muscles taut. The pre-war robot whistled softly, static crackling through its voice module. "Entity. Reaction patterns indicate assessment of threat. Recommendation: maintain distance. Observe." The Autobot's head tilted, registering the input. Sensors scanned the chamber again, tracking micro-tremors, air pressure changes, dust displacement, and the faint hum of latent circuits in every corner. A sudden thud echoed from a tunnel deeper in the vault. Loose panels clattered, and a faint hiss of displaced dust followed. The humans flinched collectively, holding their ground as adrenaline coursed through them. The Autobot's optics focused on the source. He stepped forward deliberately, each footfall producing a controlled vibration through the concrete floor. Dust hissed under his plating, settling slowly, barely audible above the residual hum of dormant machinery. The ancient war machine groaned faintly, metal grinding against metal as if acknowledging his approach. Sparks flickered along exposed wiring embedded in the walls. The pre-war robot hovered closer, thrusters hissing unevenly, attempting to match the Autobot's calculated path. The NCR exhaled slowly, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. "We need to leave soon," she said. "Whatever this thing is, it's not going to ignore us forever." The scarred man nodded, voice low. "Every second we stay, it learns, adapts, decides." The super mutant growled again, a deep, vibrating warning that rippled through the floor. "We're too close," he muttered. The Autobot paused, body coiled, sensors flaring. Every vibration, every micro-movement, every hiss of dust and groan of metal was processed. He read the intent beneath the hulking machine's dormant presence. It was calculating, waiting, assessing. Step by step, he backed the humans toward the entrance, guiding their path while keeping the ancient war machine's attention on him. Dust hissed as each plate shifted. Loose panels groaned. Sparks flickered faintly in response to the subtle changes in energy distribution. The vault seemed to settle around them, a living environment responding to presence and motion. The massive relic did not attack, yet every vibration suggested it was aware. Its awareness pressing against the humans' nerves, making them jump at every small noise. The scrape of loose gravel, the hiss of falling dust, the metallic clang of distant panels. The desert sun had climbed higher, spilling pale light through the vault's fractured ceiling, glinting off twisted metal and dust-laden air. Every ray illuminated the long-abandoned machinery, corroded panels, and broken conduits, making the vault seem alive with shadows. Each beam of light caught particles of sand and rust in midair, sending faint spirals that hissed softly as they fell back to the concrete floor. The Autobot moved ahead of the group, his massive frame glinting faintly in the diffuse light. Armor plates shifted quietly as he stepped, sending controlled vibrations through the cracked concrete floor. Each movement was deliberate, every micro-vibration mapped and analyzed. The humans followed cautiously, boots stirring sand and gravel that hissed beneath them, echoing faintly off the vault walls. The NCR crouched behind a collapsed terminal, rifle pressed lightly against her shoulder. Her eyes traced every shadow, every glint of reflected light, anticipating movement. Sweat streaked dust across her face, tasting of metal and ash. "We shouldn't be this deep," she muttered, voice low. "It's like the place remembers." The scarred man's fingers drummed nervously against the grip of his pistol. "Yeah," he muttered, "and it's not fond of visitors." His boots scuffed across loose gravel, sending a faint cascade of tiny stones and dust hissing to the floor. The pre-war robot hovered beside the Autobot, thrusters hissing intermittently to adjust to the uneven air current stirred by the massive figure's movements. Sparks flickered faintly along corroded circuits, each hiss and click punctuating the tense silence. Its optics widened and narrowed in quick succession, analyzing the vault, the humans, and the lurking war machine that remained just beyond the dim light. The super mutant's deep, guttural breaths vibrated through the cracked floor as he stalked beside the humans. His enormous hands brushed lightly against rubble-strewn walls, sending faint tremors through the concrete. He sniffed the air, detecting the sharp metallic tang of long-dormant machinery awakening, and the faint trace of irradiated dust settling on the vault floor. A low rumble echoed from deeper in the vault, resonating through the walls and floors. Dust cascaded from overhead panels, settling in lazy spirals. The humans froze mid-step, muscles taut, breaths caught. The Autobot paused, head tilting slightly, sensors flaring. The vibrations in the floor were irregular, patterns not random but deliberate. The ancient war machine was stirring, shifting its weight beneath layers of concrete. Each micro-vibration carried intent, warning, and calculated pressure. The NCR's hand twitched near her rifle. "It's moving," she whispered. "It knows we're here." Her words were swallowed almost immediately by the hiss of dust and shifting debris. The scarred man swallowed hard, glancing nervously at the vault's fractured walls. "We need a plan," he muttered. "Something fast." The Autobot stepped forward slowly, armor grinding faintly, sending a precise vibration through the floor. Dust cascaded from plating edges, hissing softly. Every motion communicated awareness, control, and presence to both the humans and the dormant machine. He moved with measured authority, leading the group while keeping the massive war machine's attention squarely on him. A sudden metallic clang echoed from a distant corridor. Loose panels rattled violently, sending clouds of fine dust spiraling into the air. The humans flinched. The pre-war robot hissed and emitted a series of static clicks, attempting to interpret the noise. Sparks flickered faintly from its exposed circuits. The supermutant growled low in his throat, muscles coiling instinctively. "It's testing us," he said, voice vibrating through the concrete. Feeling for weakness, the Autobot's optics narrowed. He stepped closer to the center of the chamber, positioning himself strategically between the humans and the deep shadows where the ancient war machine lingered. Dust spiraled from his plated shoulders, settling in delicate streams on the cracked concrete floor. The humans instinctively pressed closer, each footfall stirring fine clouds of grit that hissed faintly as they settled. A distant hollow thud vibrated through the vault. The ancient war machine had shifted again, partially upright, heavy armor grinding faintly against the corroded metal floor. Sparks arced along its exposed wiring, mingling with the hiss of falling dust and the faint hum of energy cores long dormant. The NCR exhaled sharply, gripping her rifle tighter. "We're not ready for this," she whispered. "We shouldn't even be here." The scarred man's teeth ground together. "Too late for that," he muttered. "It's awake, and it knows it can crush us." The pre-war robot floated closer, thrusters hissing unevenly, struggling to maintain position in the eddies of dust stirred by the Autobot's weight. "Reassessment. Threat level increasing. Recommendation evacuation," it stammered. Sparks flickered along exposed circuits, casting brief flashes across the chamber. The Autobot's head tilted slightly. He absorbed the data, scanning every vibration, every shift in dust, every micro-movement in the environment. Step by step, he adjusted, sending controlled vibrations into the floor that acted as both warning and signal, guiding the humans, gauging the war machine's responses, and maintaining dominance in the environment. A sudden tremor shook the vault. Loose panels rattled violently, dust cascading in lazy streams. The massive figure in the shadows shifted forward, revealing glimpses of rusted armor plates and sparking conduits. Its optics flickered faintly, a ghostly red glow in the dim light. The humans pressed instinctively closer to the Autobot, hearts pounding in rhythm with the vibrations in the floor. The supermutant growled, a deep resonating vibration that echoed faintly against the vault walls. "It's learning," he muttered, watching, waiting. The Autobot stepped deliberately, each footfall producing a low-frequency vibration that reverberated through the floor. Dust cascaded from his plating. Loose gravel slid in tiny avalanches, hissing softly. The humans followed his rhythm instinctively, guided by the subtle cues only he could manipulate with such precision. The pre-war robot hovered beside him, circuits crackling faintly, attempting to emulate the Autobot's measured movements. Sparks leapt along its arms in short bursts, each one punctuating the tense silence. Another metallic groan echoed from deep within the vault, louder this time. The ancient war machine had shifted its massive weight, moving slowly toward them. Panels groaned, and sand and dust cascaded from overhead cracks. Every vibration carried intent. Every hiss, every clatter, every micro ripple in the floor communicated information. The NCR whispered under her breath. "We can't fight that." She swallowed hard, eyes wide, sweat dripping into dust streaked across her face. The scarred man muttered, voice trembling slightly, "We survive by moving, by following." His words trailed off as the floor trembled beneath a heavier thud from the approaching war machine. The Autobot stepped forward, positioning his massive frame between the humans and the looming threat. Each movement sent controlled vibrations through the floor, a mechanical heartbeat resonating faintly, guiding the humans and warning the ancient machine. Dust spiraled in faint clouds around his plating, loose panels trembled softly, sparks flickered from nearby conduits. The vault corridors stretched like fractured veins, twisted and half-collapsed, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of ozone from sparking circuits. The Autobot led the humans through the winding passages, every movement precise, deliberate, grinding softly as his massive armor shifted with careful control. Each footfall sent measured vibrations through the cracked concrete floors, alerting him to weak points and hidden dangers. Dust cascaded in thin, whispering sheets, settling slowly on broken panels and rubble. The NCR clutched her rifle, knuckles white, sweat streaking the grime on her face. "I can't believe we're still moving," she whispered, voice barely audible over the hiss of disturbed dust. Each breath carried the metallic tang of rust, decay, and lingering radiation, mixing with the acrid scent of old circuits. The scarred man stumbled slightly, boots crunching against loose gravel and scattered sand. "We're walking into a trap," he muttered, voice tense, eyes darting at every shadow. "Something's following us, and it's learning." The super mutant's low, guttural growl vibrated through the concrete floor, reverberating faintly through the walls. His massive hands brushed against fractured supports as he moved, sending tremors into the floor and stirring tiny avalanches of dust and debris. His nostrils flared with the sharp, metallic tang of long-dormant machinery awakening, mixed with a lingering scent of scorched metal from the pre-war war machine still lurking somewhere deeper in the vault. The pre-war robot hovered beside the Autobot, thrusters hissing in uneven bursts to maintain position in the chaotic air currents stirred by movement. Sparks flickered intermittently along corroded panels, casting brief glimmers across the dust-filled corridors. Its optics flicked rapidly, analyzing the environment, the humans, and the latent threat ahead. A low, resonating thrum echoed from the depths of the vault. The walls vibrated faintly, dust cascaded from overhead cracks, loose panels shifted and clattered, a harsh percussion in the tense silence. The humans froze mid-step. Even the super mutant tensed, coiling his massive frame like a spring ready to strike. The Autobot paused, optics narrowing. He read the vibrations in the floor, tracing the patterns, measuring intent. The massive war machine had shifted again, deeper within the vault, and every pulse it sent was deliberate. Weight, mass, threat. The hum of latent energy cores, mixed with the grinding of corroded machinery, painted a map of the hazard they faced. The NCR whispered, voice trembling, "It's not random. It's hunting." The scarred man exhaled sharply, shifting a step closer to the Autobot. "And we're the prey," he muttered, voice low, almost swallowed by the hiss of dust cascading from above. The Autobot's massive foot shifted, sending a soft vibration into the floor. Dust cascaded off his plating. The micro-tremor reverberated through concrete, sand, and loose rubble. The humans instinctively pressed closer, following his rhythm, every subtle vibration guiding their path and gauging the responses of the ancient machine lurking behind them. A metallic groan echoed faintly from deeper in the vault. punctuated by the hiss of dislodged dust. Sparks leapt from exposed wiring embedded in fractured panels, illuminating the shadows in fleeting flashes. The pre-war robot whistled softly, static crackling through its speaker. Hostile entity. Active. Threat escalation imminent. The super mutant growled, a low, vibrating note that reverberated through the floor. "It's learning our patterns," he muttered, feeling our weight, listening to our steps. The Autobot tilted his head slightly, absorbing the data. Every vibration, every displaced grain of dust, every echoing metallic click fed into his calculations. He adjusted his pace, sending controlled micro-vibrations through the floor to disrupt the war machine's readings, masking the human's presence and guiding them toward stability. A sudden crash resounded from the corridor ahead, panels collapsing, dust cascading in fine sheets. Loose wires snapped against fractured metal, sending sparks dancing across the walls. The humans froze instinctively. The scarred man whispered, voice tight, "It's coming." The Autobot's optics flared faintly. He stepped forward deliberately, each footfall calculated, sending vibrations that resonated through concrete and rubble alike. Dust hissed from his armor joints, cascading in slow, whispering clouds. The humans followed in rhythm, instinctively trusting the cadence and weight of his movements. The distant war machine shifted again, a massive scrape of metal echoing through the corridors. Sparks flew along exposed conduits, dust spiraled in lazy clouds. Every pulse, every tremor, every metallic groan carried intent, pressing against the humans' nerves, forcing them to flinch at every microsound. The NCR exhaled sharply, voice barely a whisper. "We're not ready for this." She gripped her rifle tighter, knuckles white. "We're never ready." The scarred man's voice was low, trembling. "We survive by moving and following," he muttered, "following him." He nodded toward the Autobot, whose presence filled the corridor, absorbing attention and danger like a wall of living metal. The Autobot's footfalls continued, each one precise. Dust cascaded from the edges of his plating. Micro-vibrations rippled through the floor. The humans followed, guided, shielded, and synchronized by the subtle orchestration of his presence. A low rumble reverberated through the vault. Loose panels rattled violently. The ancient war machine had shifted its massive weight, emerging partially from the shadows. Rusted armor glinted in fractured sunlight. Sparks arced faintly from exposed circuits. The humans froze instinctively, pressed close to the Autobot's frame. The pre-war robot hovered nearer, thrusters hissing unevenly. Sparks flickered along its corroded panels as it mirrored the Autobot's precise movements. Its optics widened, attempting to calculate the unfolding scenario. The super mutant's deep growl resonated through the floor, warning the humans and the relic alike. "It's watching, learning, calculating," he muttered. "We can't hide from it." The Autobot paused briefly, reading every vibration, every whisper of dust, every micro-ripple in the air. He positioned himself strategically, his massive presence creating a buffer, shielding the humans from the full force of the war machine's awareness. Step by step he guided them, the rhythm of his movements both command and protection. The NCR exhaled, voice tight with fear and awe. He's not just shielding us, he's controlling the battlefield." The scarred man's eyes followed the Autobot, wide and tense. "We're alive because of him," he muttered. "Nothing else matters right now." A final heavy tremor ran through the vault. Loose debris rattled, dust cascaded from panels, sparks arced along broken circuits. The war machine lurked deeper in the shadows, its presence oppressive, calculating. Yet the Autobot's deliberate movements had kept it at bay, buying precious time. The first light of morning seeped weakly through the vault entrance, pale and trembling, scattering across sand and rusted metal. The Autobot stood at the threshold, towering and still, sensors flaring faintly as he scanned the desert beyond. The wind shifted, carrying the dry, metallic tang of irradiated sand, the faint hiss of distant turbines, and the acrid smell of scorched circuits lingering from the vault's chaos. The humans emerged behind him slowly, boots stirring dust and gravel that hissed softly with each step. The NCR wiped her face. Grime and sweat streaked in jagged lines, tasting the bitter tang of iron and ash with every exhale. Her rifle remained slung across her shoulder, lowered but ready. The scarred man shook grit from his hair, dust cascading from shoulders. "I didn't think we'd make it," he muttered. His voice was hoarse, vibrating faintly in the still air. He glanced back toward the vault entrance, where shadows pooled, and the remnants of the ancient war machine lingered, half obscured by fractured panels and dust. The supermutant trailed last, each massive step pressing into the sand with a low, resonating thrum. His nostrils flared, tasting the dry, metallic air, detecting the faint radiation of buried machinery still pulsing beneath the desert floor. "It's quiet now," he muttered, voice low. "Too quiet." The Autobot stepped forward, armor creaking softly, joints grinding faintly as dust cascaded from plating edges. Micro-vibrations rippled through the sand and concrete remnants at the vault entrance. His optics swept across the horizon, mapping debris, distant hills, and the fractured remnants of old highways. The NCR exhaled sharply. "We survived. Because of him," she whispered. Her eyes followed the Autobot, noting the way he moved with precision and awareness, each step calculated to shield them from the lingering threat. The scarred man nodded. "Yeah, he's more than a machine," he muttered. "Something about him feels alive." Dust trickled from his sleeves as he adjusted his pack, the hiss of displaced sand punctuating his words. The pre-war robot hovered beside the Autobot, thrusters hissing softly. Sparks flickered along corroded panels, illuminating faint dust clouds in its wake. "Assessment. Human companions stabilized," it crackled in static-laden tones. "Threat from ancient war machine diminished. Recommendation: continue evacuation." The supermutant growled softly, shoulders tensing. "I can still feel it," he said, voice vibrating through the sand. "It's not gone. Just waiting." The Autobot's optics flared faintly. He did not speak, but the humans understood. Step by step, he moved forward, dust hissing beneath armor, micro-vibrations rippling outward, every motion calculated to keep them safe. Outside, the desert stretched like a fractured expanse of rust and sand. Collapsed overpasses jutted into the horizon, metal skeletal and sharp against the pale light. The wind stirred, hissing across shards of metal and sand, carrying the faint, acrid smell of radiation and burnt circuitry. Small, brittle rocks clinked against one another as the group passed, and the distant cry of a lone bird, or mutated scavenger, echoed faintly across the wasteland. The NCR lowered her head, squinting against the harsh light. "We can't go back in there," she said, voice rough. "Not with it waiting, not with him." She gestured toward the Autobot. "He's the only reason we made it out." The scarred man adjusted his pack, dust hissing from its edges. "We survive now because he chose to protect us," he said quietly. "That's the difference. Luck has nothing to do with it." The supermutant sniffed the air, muscles coiled, sensing micro-vibrations from the desert floor. "It's still watching," he said. "From below, from wherever it sleeps." The Autobot's optics swept across the horizon, Tracking subtle shifts in sand and distant shapes, micro-vibrations traced the landscape, mapping potential threats and terrain hazards. His sensors absorbed every whisper of wind, every soft hiss of sand over rusted metal, every faint trace of radiation. A faint hum rose from buried infrastructure, almost imperceptible, resonating with the residual energy of the ancient war machine. Dust spiraled from small cracks in the ground as the group moved, settling softly in thin streams. The humans flinched at each sound, but the Autobots' presence anchored them. The NCR exhaled, dust swirling in her wake. "We need shelter," she said, voice low. "We can't stay exposed like this." The scarred man looked around, scanning the horizon. "There's a settlement not far from here," he said. "Ruined buildings, but walls still standing. We can make it there before nightfall." The super mutant's gaze swept the area, nostrils flaring. "Few threats out here now," he said, voice low, "but it's a desert. Every step counts." The Autobot shifted slightly, micro-vibrations moving through sand and rubble, assessing the safest path across the fractured terrain. Dust spiraled in faint eddies as he lifted a large shard of metal from the path, clearing the way with deliberate precision. The humans followed in rhythm, each footfall stirring clouds that hissed softly as they settled. A sudden breeze carried the faint metallic tang of distant pre-war machinery. Sparks of static energy leapt faintly from buried wiring, unnoticed by the humans but registered instantly by the Autobot. He adjusted his path slightly, micro-vibrations rippling through the sand to compensate for potential hazards. The NCR glanced at him. You can feel it," she said quietly. "Every shift, every tremor. It's like you know what's coming." The Autobot's optics flickered, acknowledging her observation without words. Dust spiraled from his shoulders as he shifted weight, guiding them steadily across the wasteland. The pre-war robot mirrored his movements, thrusters hissing faintly, sparks flickering in response to environmental stimuli. The scarred man muttered under his breath, "We're alive because of him, and because we followed him. Nothing else mattered." The super mutant growled softly, eyes scanning the horizon. "But it's not over," he said. "The war machine, the vault, it's still out there." The Autobot led them to the edge of a shattered overpass, overlooking a ruined settlement below. Dust rose in thin clouds from collapsed walls, rusted metal glittering faintly in the pale sunlight. Micro-vibrations rippled through the ground as the Autobots scanned the area, mapping potential paths, weak structures, and lingering threats. The humans paused, taking in the ruins. The NCR exhaled, voice soft. "We made it," she whispered, though uncertainty lingered in her tone. "But this isn't safe. Not completely." The scarred man nodded, shoulders tense. "Safe enough to survive," he said quietly, eyes scanning the settlement below. "And that's all that matters for now." The super mutant sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. "Few threats, temporary calm," he said. "But it waits. Beneath the earth." The Autobot shifted slightly, sensors scanning subtle shifts in the ruins, micro-vibrations tracing hidden hazards. Dust spiraled around his plating in thin, whispering clouds. He did not speak. His presence alone communicated assurance, control, and vigilance. The pre-war robot hovered beside him, thrusters hissing softly. Sparks flickered from its corroded circuits, illuminating faint dust clouds in rhythm with the Autobot's micro-vibrations. Its optics reflected both caution and recognition. The Autobot had guided them through peril, and now they faced the ruins of civilization together. The group began their descent toward the settlement, following the Autobot's lead. Each step stirred dust and gravel, the hiss of settling debris echoing softly through the ruins. Micro-vibrations traced their path, ensuring each step was measured, each landing stable. The desert wind carried faint metallic tangs of old machinery, the whisper of sand over rusted panels, and the subtle hum of distant energy sources. The ruined settlement stretched beneath them like a skeleton of pre-war ambition. Crumbled walls jutted at jagged angles, rusted metal beams glinting faintly in the pale sunlight. Dust rose in lazy spirals from fractured roofs, stirred by the faint breeze that carried the dry, metallic tang of irradiated sand. The Autobot paused at the top of a collapsed overpass, optics flaring faintly as he scanned every micro-detail: loose beams, unstable flooring, and hidden crevices that might conceal threats. The NCR followed closely, boots crunching against gravel-strewn debris, stirring tiny clouds that hissed softly as they settled. She wiped sweat and dust from her face, tasting the faint tang of iron in the air. Her eyes flicked constantly, scanning the settlement, noting weak walls, collapsed passages, and the subtle shift of debris that might hide danger. "We need shelter. Somewhere solid," she murmured, voice low. The scarred man adjusted his pack, dust cascading in thin streams. "Solid enough to hold us tonight," he said quietly. "Not that we're safe. Just survivable." He exhaled sharply, dust swirling in front of him, and adjusted the straps on his shoulders. The super mutant's deep, resonating breaths vibrated faintly through the cracked concrete below. His massive hands brushed against crumbled walls as he descended, sending subtle tremors through the sand and rubble. "Too quiet," he muttered. "Not natural. Vault stirred something. Maybe more than us." His gaze swept the settlement, nostrils flaring with the faint metallic tang of long-dormant machinery beneath the sand. The pre-war robot hovered beside the Autobot, thrusters hissing faintly as sparks flickered intermittently along corroded panels. Its optics scanned every fractured roof, every shadowed corridor, every rusted vehicle. "Settlement appears intact enough for temporary habitation," it crackled, voice static-laden. "Structural integrity, compromised but usable. Threat assessment, low immediate risk. Recommendation, establish perimeter." The Autobot stepped carefully onto the settlement's main street, dust hissing softly under his massive feet, micro-vibrations rippling outward. Each movement communicated presence, control, and security to the humans behind him. Loose rubble shifted in faint avalanches, settling with a whisper against the cracked concrete. Sparks flickered from broken conduits along the street, illuminating fragments of walls, exposed wiring, and the faint outlines of abandoned vehicles. The NCR exhaled, voice tight but quiet. "We survived the vault. Barely. And now we're in the open. I don't like it." Her fingers tightened around her rifle, dust brushing her knuckles. She paused to scan the settlement, noting jagged shadows where the wind stirred debris across the cracked streets. The scarred man muttered under his breath, "Open or closed, we're alive because of him." Nodding toward the Autobot, dust cascaded from his shoulders as he shifted, footsteps hissing faintly across uneven concrete. Nothing else mattered. The super mutant's gaze swept across the buildings, nostrils flaring. "Quiet now. Too quiet," he said. "Vault, war machine. It's still out there, waiting, watching." The Autobot paused, optics flaring faintly. He scanned the surrounding ruins, sensors flaring to capture micro-vibrations in walls, subtle shifts in sand, the faint hum of latent radiation in buried machinery. Dust spiraled softly in the air as he lifted a rusted metal beam blocking their path, clearing the way with careful, deliberate movements. Sparks flickered briefly where it scraped against twisted metal, illuminating thin clouds of suspended dust. The pre-war robot hovered closer, thrusters hissing intermittently. Its optics widened as it registered the subtle micro-vibrations, trying to replicate the Autobot's careful pathing. "Perimeter establishment recommended," it said, voice crackling. "Human companions vulnerable without guidance. Environmental hazards present." The NCR stepped forward, boots crunching against small gravel, stirring clouds that hissed softly as they settled. "Then we follow him," she whispered. "It's the only way we make it through tonight." The scarred man nodded. "Survive first. Question everything later," he muttered. Dust cascaded from his sleeves as he adjusted his pack, eyes scanning every collapsed roof, every rusted car, every shadowed alleyway. The super mutant growled low, a deep vibration that resonated through the sand beneath them. "I can feel the ruins, every crack, every hidden panel, every buried hazard," he muttered. "It's alive. Not like the vault, but alive enough to kill." The Autobot stepped onto a broader street, micro-vibrations rippling through sand, gravel, and cracked concrete alike. His optics swept across the horizon, tracking shifts in the wind, movement in distant debris, the subtle rise and fall of hidden sand drifts. Dust spiraled in soft eddies, stirred by the wind and their movement. Sparks flickered intermittently from broken conduits embedded in collapsed walls. The humans followed closely, guided by the Autobot's rhythm. Each footfall stirred clouds of dust that hissed softly as they settled. Their movements were synchronized with his, unconsciously adopting his measured cadence. A sudden hollow metallic clang echoed from a collapsed warehouse ahead. Dust cascaded from panels overhead, settling in thin, whispering sheets. The humans froze instinctively. The super mutant growled low in response. The Autobot's head tilted slightly, optics flaring. Micro-vibrations in the ground traced the source, dislodged debris, partially unstable beams, the lingering pulse of dormant machinery buried beneath concrete. Step by step, he guided the group past the hazard, each footfall calculated to minimize risk and maintain safety. The NCR exhaled sharply, voice tight. "I didn't think we'd make it this far," she said. Dust spiraled around her as she shifted, boots crunching softly across broken asphalt. The scarred man muttered, "We made it because of him. That's all that matters." The super mutant sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. "Vault danger behind, but not gone. Desert keeps secrets. Watch everything!" The Autobot led them into the ruins of a partially intact building, walls crumbling but standing. Dust cascaded from the ceiling in faint streams, settling on broken furniture and exposed wiring. Sparks flickered from exposed circuits embedded in walls, illuminating thin clouds of settling debris. The humans settled in cautiously, scanning the surrounding streets and rooftops. The NCR's rifle rested across her knees, eyes sharp. The scarred man checked his pack, dust cascading from edges. The super mutant crouched low, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring as he sampled the air. The pre-war robot hovered nearby, thrusters hissing, sparks flickering intermittently. "Perimeter established," it crackled. "Environmental hazards minimized. Human companions stabilized." The Autobot remained at the doorway, optics flaring faintly. Sensors swept the settlement, mapping each micro-vibration in sand, concrete, and debris. Every sound, the hiss of falling dust, the clink of loose metal, the faint whine of distant wind, was recorded, analyzed, and stored. He did not speak. His presence alone provided stability, assurance, and protection. A faint breeze stirred dust along the street, carrying the metallic tang of old circuits and irradiated sand. The humans exhaled in quiet relief, settling into the fragile calm the Autobot had created. The super mutant's growl softened, muscles relaxing slightly. The NCR wiped sweat and dust from her brow. The scarred man exhaled, settling against a partially intact wall. The sun dipped low over the ruined settlement, pale light spilling over jagged rooftops and rusted metal beams. Dust drifted in thin clouds, illuminated by fading rays, settling softly on crumbling walls and fractured asphalt. The Autobot stood sentinel at the edge of the street, massive frame unmoving, optics glowing faintly as he scanned the horizon. Every vibration, every whisper of wind, every subtle shift in the sand beneath his feet was catalogued, analyzed, and responded to. The NCR crouched beside a partially intact wall, her rifle resting loosely across her knees. Sweat streaked her dust-stained face, taste of iron and ash lingering in her mouth. Her eyes swept the settlement, noting shadows that could conceal threats, cracks in walls that could collapse, and the faint glimmer of metal reflecting the dying sun. "We've survived, and it's only because of him," she whispered, voice low. The scarred man adjusted his pack, dust hissing from its edges, and exhaled sharply. "Alive because of him," he muttered, voice hoarse. Nothing else mattered. His boots pressed against rubble, micro-vibrations echoing faintly through the sand, aligning instinctively with the Autobot's rhythm. The super mutant crouched nearby, massive frame coiled like a spring, nostrils flaring as he sampled the air. The faint metallic tang of buried machinery lingered, mixed with the acrid scent of old circuitry and irradiated sand. "Quiet now," he said, voice low, resonating through the ground. "But danger, it's still out there." The pre-war robot hovered silently beside the Autobot, thrusters hissing intermittently, sparks flickering across corroded panels. Its optics scanned every shadowed corner, every fractured wall, every subtle micro-vibration. "Perimeter secure," it crackled in static-laden tones. "Human companions stable. Immediate threat diminished. Recommendation: rest and recovery." The Autobot shifted slightly, armor creaking faintly, micro-vibrations rippling through sand and rubble. Dust cascaded from his plating, settling softly on the cracked street. He did not speak, but his presence conveyed assurance. The humans felt it immediately, a tether of safety, awareness, and control in the midst of fragile calm. The NCR exhaled, dust swirling faintly around her. "I never thought we'd see sunlight again. Not after that vault," she murmured, voice almost lost to the whisper of the wind across rubble. Her rifle rested, but her eyes never left the horizon. The scarred man's lips pressed tight, hands brushing away streaks of dust and sweat. "We did, because of him. And now, we move forward," he said quietly. Each word echoed faintly across the settlement, lost almost immediately to the settling dust and distant hum of hidden energy. The super mutant's eyes swept the streets, muscles coiled, every footfall and micro-vibration of the group analyzed instinctively. "Survive today. But tomorrow," he muttered. "Tomorrow. The desert watches." The Autobot's optics flared softly, tracking faint shifts in the horizon. Sand drifts rising, shadows lengthening, the hum of buried machinery pulsing gently beneath layers of concrete. Dust swirled faintly, stirred by his subtle movement, falling in thin sheets across the fractured street. A faint breeze carried the metallic tang of rusted pre-war machinery and irradiated sand. The NCR inhaled slowly, letting the bitter taste linger, grounding herself in the fragile safety. "We'll rest here," she whispered, "and then we figure out our next move." The scarred man nodded. "For now, we survive," he said, gaze fixed on the Autobot. And maybe we learn. Dust cascaded from his shoulders, hissing softly as it settled. The super mutant growled low, resonating through the sand. Survival, temporary calm. But vigilance is key, he muttered. Vault danger, war machine. All waiting. The Autobot shifted again, micro-vibrations rippling outward, dust spiraling softly in response. His optics scanned every shadowed corner of the settlement, every fractured wall, every exposed conduit. Sparks flickered faintly along his armor where joints released subtle pressure. The humans instinctively pressed closer, boots crunching against rubble, stirring clouds that hissed softly as they settled. The pre-war robot hovered beside him, thrusters hissing faintly in rhythm with micro-vibrations, sparks flickering along corroded panels. Human companion stabilized, it crackled. Threat assessment reduced. Recommendation, monitoring and forward movement when appropriate. The sun sank lower, bathing the settlement in muted gold and casting long, fractured shadows across the streets. Dust spiraled in thin sheets, settling softly over rubble and metal alike. The Autobot's presence was the anchor in this fragile calm, the constant, unwavering sentinel guarding the humans against dangers both known and unseen. The NCR exhaled again, letting the tension ease slightly, though not entirely. "We owe him," she whispered almost reverently, "and I think he knows it." The scarred man nodded, voice low. "Alive because of him. That's enough. For now." Dust cascaded faintly from his pack as he shifted weight, micro-vibrations aligning with the Autobot's controlled rhythm. The super mutant sniffed the air, muscles relaxing fractionally. "For today, calm. Tomorrow, vigilance," he muttered. The Autobot stood at the threshold of the settlement, sensors flaring softly, optics scanning the horizon, absorbing every vibration, every hiss of dust, every subtle shift in energy. His presence spoke without words, safety, guidance, and unwavering protection. The pre-war robot floated beside him, sparks flickering intermittently. Monitoring continues. Environmental threats remain. Human companion stabilized. Autobot remains operational. The humans settled in among the partially intact buildings, cautiously exploring, clearing debris, and establishing a temporary perimeter. Dust spiraled in soft clouds as they moved, settling in thin, whispering sheets over shattered furniture, cracked walls, and exposed wiring. The Autobot's micro-vibrations rippled outward, stabilizing every uncertain step. The sun dipped below the distant horizon, casting the settlement into muted twilight. Shadows stretched long and fractured across the rubble-strewn streets. Dust continued to swirl lazily in thin streams, settling softly over the fragile ruins. The NCR exhaled softly, voice low. "We survive, and for now, that's enough." The scarred man nodded, settling against a partially intact wall. "Alive, safe, and guided," he said quietly. Dust hissed faintly as it settled around him. The super mutant crouched nearby, muscles relaxed but vigilant, nostrils flaring faintly. "Calm, temporary, but survival requires awareness," he said, voice low, vibrating through sand and rubble. The Autobot remained at the edge of the settlement, sentinel and protector. Optics flared faintly, sensors absorbing every micro-vibration, every whisper of dust, every faint trace of energy in the sand and rubble. Sparks flickered along his joints where pressure released gently. The pre-war robot hovered beside him, thrusters hissing softly, sparks flickering intermittently. Monitoring continues. Human companion stabilized. Autobot operational. New status quo. Fragile calm maintained.